Can we hurry this up? I'll write a check for the windshield and be done with it. My time is not free, and I'm not paying a cancellation fee because of some parking drama.
This is not a story about a simple public disturbance. It is a case study on the absolute collapse of social decency when wealth meets unchecked narcissism. You are about to watch a woman who believed her bank account gave her the right to scream, threaten, and assault a minimum wage worker, walk into my courtroom and try that same tactic on a judge. What starts as a hearing for disorderly conduct turns into the single most satisfying reality check I have ever delivered from the bench. Stay tuned, because the moment she realizes her money cannot buy her way out of this room is a moment you will want to replay over and over again. I am Judge Boyd. I have built a reputation on being fair, but firm. I run a tight ship. I have dealt with gang leaders, career criminals, and violent offenders who showed more respect for the law than the woman who walked into my courtroom on the morning of November 14th, 2023. Her name was Patricia Patty Vanderhoven, and she was about to learn that in my court, dignity is the only currency that matters. Let's set the scene. The docket that morning was heavy, filled with the usual arraignments and pleas. My clerk handed me the file for case number 24C, R0092, State versus Patricia Vanderhoven. The charges were assault in the third degree, destruction of private property, and disorderly conduct. The defendant was the 54-year-old wife of a real estate tycoon, a socialite who lived in a gated community where the houses start at $5 million. She arrived at the courthouse in a white Range Rover, parked it in a spot reserved for emergency vehicles, and marched inside like she owned the building. The victim, sitting quietly in the back row, was 19-year-old Liam Turner. Liam was a delivery driver for a local sandwich shop. He was working 3 jobs to put himself through community college, studying to be a paramedic. He drove a beat-up 2008 Toyota Corolla that held together with duct tape and prayers. He was the kind of young man who looked you in the eye when he spoke, the kind who called everyone sir or ma'am. On the day of the incident, October 2nd, Liam had double parked for exactly 30 seconds to deliver a lunch order to an office building. According to the police report, Mrs. Vanderhoven was blocked in. Instead of honking or waiting, she exited her vehicle, took a metal thermos from her car, and smashed the windshield of Liam's Toyota. When Liam came running out, apologizing profusely, she didn't stop. She threw her hot latte in his face, causing first-degree burns on his neck and chest. She then stood over him while he wiped the scalding liquid from his eyes and screamed that he was trash who didn't deserve to breathe the same air as her. When the police arrived, she didn't apologize. She asked the officers if they knew who her husband was. She told them to arrest Liam for emotional distress caused by his poor parking. The officers, to their credit, arrested her instead, and that brings us to my courtroom. When I called the case, Patricia Vanderhoven didn't approach the bench. She stood by her seat, checking her nails, while her high-priced attorney, Mr. Charles Sterling, walked up alone. "Your Honor," Sterling began, smoothing his silk tie, "my client would like to expedite this. She has a spa appointment at 11. I looked at the clock. It was 9:50 a.m. I looked at Liam, sitting there with a bandage on his neck. Then I looked at Mrs. Vanderhoven, who was now audibly sighing, tapping her designer heel against the floor. I felt that familiar tightening in my jaw. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice low and even, "in this courtroom, the only schedule that matters is mine. And unless your client wants to spend her spa time in a holding cell, I suggest she step forward and address the court." That was the first warning. She ignored it. And that was her first mistake. Sterling, realizing the gravity of the situation, leaned in close to his client. I could see him whispering frantically, his face glistening with sweat. Whatever he said, it wasn't enough to wipe the look of disdain off Patricia Vanderhoven's face, but it was enough to get her moving. She rolled her eyes, a gesture so exaggerated it was almost theatrical, and sauntered toward the defense table. She didn't walk. She strutted, as if the aisle of my courtroom were a runway at Fashion Week. When she finally arrived at the podium, she didn't look at me. She didn't look at the prosecutor, and she certainly didn't look at Liam, the young man whose skin was still blistering from her temper tantrum. Instead, she pulled a compact mirror from her designer purse and checked her lipstick. The silence in the room was deafening. Even the court reporter stopped typing, waiting to see what would happen next. Mrs. van der Hoven, I said, breaking the silence. My voice didn't boom, but it carried a weight that usually makes defendants straighten their posture. Put the mirror away. You are not at a country club luncheon. You are in a court of law, facing serious criminal charges. And if you disrespect this court one more time, I will revoke your bail faster than you can say spa day. She snapped the compact shut with a loud click and looked up at me, an expression of bored amusement on her face. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I'm here. Can we please hurry this up? My esthetician charges a cancellation fee, and I really don't feel like paying it because of some administrative nonsense. Administrative nonsense, that is what she called assaulting a teenager and destroying his property. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand. I have seen arrogance before, but this was a special breed. This was the kind of arrogance that comes from a lifetime of never being told no. The kind that comes from believing that people like Liam exist solely to serve people like her. Mr. Sterling, I said, turning my attention to her lawyer, who looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floorboards. Your client seems to be under the impression that this is a negotiation. Please inform her that she is currently charged with assault in the 3rd degree, a Class A misdemeanor, which carries a potential sentence of 1 year in jail. And given her attitude in the last 5 minutes, let's just say she is not doing herself any favors. Sterling cleared his throat, his voice shaky. Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. We believe there are mitigating circumstances. Mitigating circumstances? I asked, raising an eyebrow. I have read the police report, Mr. Sterling. I have seen the photos of Mr. Turner's injuries. I have seen the video footage from the security camera across the street. Unless Mrs. van der Hoven was possessed by a demon at the time of the incident, I fail to see how throwing boiling liquid at a human being because of a parking spot has any mitigating circumstances. Before Sterling could answer, Patricia leaned into the microphone. It wasn't boiling, she interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. It was a latte, and it was lukewarm at best. That boy is being dramatic. Just look at him. She gestured toward Liam without even turning her head. He's probably looking for a payout. I know his type. They see a nice car and think they've hit the lottery. A gasp went through the gallery. Liam looked down at his hands, his face turning red. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. It wasn't the heat of the moment anger. It was the cold, calculated resolve of a judge who knows exactly what needs to happen next. She hadn't just insulted the victim. She had insulted the very concept of justice. Mrs. van der Hoven, I said, my voice dropping an octave, you just made a very serious mistake. You see, up until this moment, you were just a defendant with a bad attitude. But now you have my full, undivided attention. And trust me, that is the last thing you want. I picked up the medical file on my desk. The paper felt heavy, not because of the page count, but because of the undeniable proof written on it. Mrs. van der Hoven, I began, opening the report with deliberate slowness. You claim the coffee was lukewarm. You claim this young man is being dramatic. But I have here a report from Street Mary's emergency room dated October 2nd, time-stamped 1:15 p.m., exactly 45 minutes after your interaction. I adjusted my glasses and read aloud, ensuring my voice reached the back of the room. Diagnosis: partial thickness thermal burns to the neck and upper clavicle region. Treatment: debridement of blistered skin and application of silver sulfadiazine cream. Patient advised to monitor for infection. I looked up, locking eyes with her. Does debridement of blistered skin sound like the result of a lukewarm latte to you, ma'am? Because in my experience, lukewarm liquids don't peel the skin off a teenager's neck. For the first time, Patricia blinked. She shifted her weight, glancing at her lawyer, then back at me, but instead of apologizing, she doubled down. It was almost impressive, in a horrifying way, how committed she was to her own narrative. Well, she sniffed, I can't be responsible for his skin sensitivity. Maybe he has fragile skin, or maybe he poured something on himself later to frame me. People do crazy things for money, Judge. My husband deals with lawsuits from these people all the time. These people, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. By these people, I assume you mean the people who deliver your lunch, clean your streets, and park in your way? The people who don't respect my time, she corrected sharply. Do you know how much a membership at the Silver Creek Club costs? Do you know what happens when you miss a reservation because some boy in a rusted junk heap decides to block you in? I have rights, Your Honor. I have the right to leave a parking lot when I choose. You have the right to honk your horn. I shot back, my patience fraying. You have the right to wait. You do not have the right to take a metal thermos and shatter a windshield because you are inconvenienced. I turned the page to the second charge. Let's talk about that windshield. You smashed it with a stainless steel water bottle. Mr. Turner states that he had to replace the entire glass, costing him $300. That is half his weekly paycheck. Do you have anything to say about that? Patricia let out a short, incredulous laugh. $300? Is that it? I spend more than that on my dog's grooming. If he wants $300, I'll write a check right now so I can leave. Charles, give him a check. She snapped her fingers at her attorney. Sterling looked horrified. Patty, please stop talking, he hissed under his breath. No, Charles, she snapped back, loud enough for the microphone to catch every syllable. I am tired of this. This is a waste of resources. It's a windshield on a car that probably shouldn't even be on the road. It was an eyesore. If anything, I did him a favor. Now he has to get a new one. The courtroom went silent again. I looked at Liam. He wasn't looking for a payout. He was looking at the floor, his hands clenched in fists so tight his knuckles were white. He looked humiliated. This woman wasn't just breaking the law. She was breaking his spirit. She was stripping him of his dignity in front of strangers, reducing his hard work and his property to a joke. Mrs. Vanderhoven, I said, closing the file, you seem to think that because you can write a check, you can rewrite the rules of society. You think that paying for the damage erases the violence of the act. But you are missing the point entirely. I reached for the remote control on my bench. You claimed earlier that Mr. Turner blocked you in aggressively. You claimed you felt threatened. You claimed self-defense in your initial statement to the police. Is that still your story? Absolutely, she said, lifting her chin. I was a lone woman in a parking lot. He is a young man. I felt trapped. I reacted out of fear for my safety. Fear, I repeated. Interesting word choice. Because the prosecution has submitted video evidence from the security camera of the building you were visiting. And since a picture is worth 1,000 words, I think it's time we all watched exactly what fear looks like in your world. I signaled the bailiff to dim the lights. The large screen on the courtroom wall flickered to life. Patricia crossed her arms, looking bored, completely unaware that the next 60 seconds of footage were about to dismantle her entire defense and expose her character to the world. The screen illuminated the hushed courtroom, playing the black and white footage that would seal Patricia Vanderhoven's fate. We watched in silence. The video showed Liam's battered Toyota pull up to the curb. He didn't abandon the car. He put on his hazard lights, grabbed a bag of food, and literally ran into the building. He was trying to be fast. He was trying to be considerate. 7 seconds later, Patricia's Range Rover pulled up behind him. 7 seconds. That was how long she waited before the tantrum began. On screen, we didn't see a woman trembling in fear. We saw a woman consumed by rage. She didn't check her surroundings for danger. She threw her door open and marched toward Liam's car with the determination of a soldier going into battle. We watched her raise the metal thermos high above her head and bring it down on the windshield with shocking force. Glass shattered. It wasn't a defensive tap. It was a violent, malicious strike. Then came the part that made my stomach turn. Liam came running out of the building. On the video, you could clearly see his body language. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't menacing, as Patricia had claimed. His hands were clasped together in a pleading gesture. He was bowing slightly, clearly apologizing. And how did she respond to this apology? She took the cup from her other hand, removed the lid, and threw the contents directly into his face. I paused the video right at that frame, the liquid suspended in the air, Liam's hands up to protect his eyes, and Patricia's face twisted in a snarl. I turned back to the defense table. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the hard drive. Mrs. Vanderhoven, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. I want you to look at that screen. Tell me, where is the fear? Where is the self-defense? Because from where I am sitting, I see a young man apologizing, and I see a woman assaulting him because she was inconvenienced for less than 10 seconds. Patricia adjusted her scarf, looking annoyed rather than ashamed. Well, video can be misleading, Your Honor. You can't hear what he was saying. He was probably shouting obscenities. I felt threatened by his presence. He is a large man. I am a petite woman. The camera doesn't capture the vibe of the situation. The vibe? I repeated, incredulous. You assaulted him because of a vibe? Ma'am, let me explain something to you about the law. Self-defense requires an imminent threat of physical harm. It does not apply when someone is double parked. It does not apply when someone is apologizing to you. And it certainly does not apply when you are the one holding the weapon. I leaned back, crossing my arms. You claimed you were trapped, but looking at the video, there was enough room for you to back up and go around. Did you try to maneuver your vehicle? She rolled her eyes again. Why should I have to back up? I had the right of way. He was in the wrong. Why is everyone focusing on my reaction and not his illegal parking? If he hadn't broken the law, none of this would have happened. I am the victim of his negligence. There it was, the absolute refusal to take accountability. In her mind, Liam's minor traffic infraction justified her violent assault. She truly believed that rules were for other people, and punishment was something she dished out, not something she received. Mr. Sterling, I said, addressing her lawyer, who was currently rubbing his temples as if trying to massage away a migraine. Your client has admitted to the act. The video confirms the act. The medical report confirms the injury. And yet, she stands here claiming she is the victim. I have heard enough testimony. But before I pass judgment, there is one more thing I need to address. Something that wasn't in the initial police report, but was brought to my attention by the bailiff this morning. I picked up a small, handwritten note that had been placed on my bench when the trial began. It seems that before you entered my courtroom today, you had an interaction with the security checkpoint officers downstairs. Is that correct? Patricia stiffened. For the first time, a flicker of genuine worry crossed her face. I don't know what you're talking about. I went through security like everyone else. Not exactly like everyone else, I corrected. According to this incident report, when the officer asked you to put your bag through the scanner, you told him, and I quote, "Do you know who I am? My husband owns this building." Is that true, Mrs. von der Hoven? Does your husband own the intricate workings of the County Justice Center? It was a figure of speech, she snapped, her face flushing pink. I meant he pays taxes. He practically built this city. I was just trying to explain that I shouldn't be treated like a common criminal. And that, I said, slamming the file shut, is exactly the problem. You think there are two sets of rules, one for common criminals and one for you. You think your husband's money buys you a fast pass through life, through traffic, and through the legal system. I took a deep breath, preparing to deliver the reality check she had managed to avoid for 54 years. But today, Mrs. van der Hoven, your credit card is declined. Mrs. van der Hoven looked as if I had physically slapped her. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, her face cycling through shades of red and purple. For the first time, the reality of her situation seemed to be cracking through the shell of her entitlement. But instead of humility, what poured out was pure, unadulterated venom. She grabbed her purse, her knuckles white as she clutched the strap. "You cannot speak to me like that," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You are a public servant. You work for us. My husband pays more in property taxes in a single year than you probably earn in a decade. I am going to call the mayor. I am going to call the governor. And when I am done, you will be lucky to find a job ruling on parking tickets in a strip mall." The gallery gasped. Her lawyer, Mr. Sterling, actually put his head in his hands and groaned audibly. He knew what she seemingly didn't. "You do not threaten a sitting judge on the record. You especially do not threaten Judge Boyd." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't bang my gavel. I simply leaned forward, resting my elbows on the bench, and stared at her until she stopped talking. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. "Are you finished?" I asked quietly, because I want to make sure the court reporter got every single word of that threat. It goes very nicely with the intimidation charge I am considering adding to your docket. I turned my attention away from her, dismissing her outburst as if it were the tantrum of a toddler. Mr. Turner, I said, looking at the young man in the back row, please stand up. Liam stood slowly, wincing as the movement pulled at the bandages on his neck. He looked terrified, clutching his baseball cap in his hands. Yes, sir. I mean, Your Honor, he stammered. Mr. Turner, I said, softening my tone. I want to hear from you. Not about the windshield, not about the medical bills. I want to know how this incident has affected you. You are working 3 jobs, correct? Yes, Your Honor, Liam said, his voice quiet. I work delivery during the lunch rush. I stock shelves at the grocery store at night, and I tutor on weekends. I'm trying to pay for my EMT certification classes. And on the day in question, I continued, when Mrs. Vanderhoven destroyed your windshield and burned you, did you finish your shift? Liam looked down at his shoes. No, sir. I couldn't. The manager had to let me go because I couldn't drive the car with the broken glass, and I couldn't afford to fix it right away. So I lost the delivery job. And, well, the burns got infected because I couldn't afford the antibiotics right away, so I missed 3 shifts at the grocery store. I'm a little behind on rent now. He didn't say it with anger. He didn't say it with malice. He just stated the facts of his life, a life where one bad day, one act of cruelty from a stranger could derail everything. He lost his job, I repeated, looking back at Patricia. He missed work. He risked infection because he couldn't afford medicine. All because you couldn't wait 7 seconds. Patricia rolled her eyes, letting out a dramatic sigh. Oh, please. Here comes the sob story. If he was better at his job, he wouldn't have been fired. Why is this my problem? I offered to write a check. What more do you want? Blood? I want remorse. Mrs. Vanderhoven. I boomed, my voice finally rising to fill the room. I want you to look at this human being whose life you derailed and feel something other than annoyance, but it is clear to me that you are incapable of that. You see people like Mr. Turner as obstacles, not human beings. You see the law as a suggestion, not a mandate. I opened the sentencing guidelines on my desk. Mr. Sterling, your client has pleaded not guilty, but given the video evidence and her own admissions in open court, I am finding her guilty on all counts. Assault in the 3rd degree, destruction of private property, disorderly conduct. Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket. Your Honor, we ask for leniency. My client has no prior criminal record. She is a pillar of the community. She sits on the board of the art museum. We ask for a fine and probation. A fine? I asked, a dry chuckle escaping my lips. A fine is just a price tag for rich people to break the law. If I fine her, she will write a check and learn absolutely nothing. She will go back to her gated community, laugh about this with her friends at the country club, and do it again to the next person who inconveniences her. I looked at Patricia. She was checking her watch again. She still didn't get it. She thought the worst was over. She thought I was just lecturing her before letting her go. She was about to find out how wrong she was. Mrs. Vanderhoven, I said, my voice cold as steel. You mentioned earlier that you had a spa appointment at 11. I am afraid you are going to have to cancel that. In fact, you are going to have to clear your calendar for the foreseeable future. Patricia froze. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a wax statue. Excuse me? She sputtered, her voice rising an octave. Clear my calendar? Are you suggesting jail for a windshield? She let out a hysterical laugh, looking around the courtroom for support that wasn't there. Charles, tell him he can't do that. This is ridiculous. I am not going to jail. I have a gala on Saturday. My husband is expecting me. Your husband, I interrupted, can expect a collect call because you are not going to a gala. You are going to the detention center. I picked up my pen to sign the order, the scratching sound echoing in the silent room. Patricia Vanderhoven, for the charge of assault in the 3rd degree, I am sentencing you to 90 days in the county jail, effective immediately. For the charge of destruction of private property, you are sentenced to 30 days to run consecutively. That is a total of 120 days behind bars. No, she shrieked, slamming her hand on the defense table. You can't do this. Do you know who I am? I will ruin you. Charles, do something. Fix this. Sterling stood up, but he didn't argue. He looked defeated. He knew the law, and he knew his client had dug her own grave with every word she spoke. Your Honor, he said quietly, we request a stay of execution pending appeal. My client is not a flight risk. Denied, I said instantly. Given her threats to this court and her total lack of remorse, I consider her a risk to the community. If she thinks she can assault citizens and threaten judges, she needs a timeout immediately, not 6 months from now. I wasn't finished. I turned back to Liam. Furthermore, regarding restitution, Mrs. van der Hoven, you treated $300 like it was nothing. So let's make the number mean something. You are ordered to pay Mr. Turner $5,000 in restitution for his medical bills, his vehicle repairs, his lost wages, and the emotional distress you caused. And you will pay a $10,000 fine to the court for your contemptuous behavior today. Patricia looked like she was having an out-of-body experience. Her mouth hung open, her eyes wide with terror. The arrogance was cracking, revealing the fear underneath. But I can't go to jail, she whispered, her voice trembling. I have claustrophobia. I need my medication. I have a strict diet. You can't put me in there with those people. Those people, I said, leaning forward, are citizens, just like you. And starting right now, you are one of them. You will wear the same orange jumpsuit. You will eat the same food. You will sleep on the same cot. There are no VIP suites in my jail, Mrs. van der Hoven. There is no room service. There is just time. Time for you to think about the 7 seconds you couldn't wait. I nodded to the bailiff, Officer Miller, a man who had zero patience for entitlement. He unhooked the handcuffs from his belt. The metallic clink-clink sound was the loudest noise in the room. Officer Miller, I said, remand the defendant into custody. As Miller approached the defense table, Patricia recoiled. She backed away, knocking over her chair. Don't touch me, she screamed, holding her designer purse like a shield. Get away from me. Charles, call Richard. Tell him to get down here. This is a mistake. This is a nightmare. It is not a nightmare, ma'am, Officer Miller said calmly, grabbing her wrist and spinning her around. It's reality. Put your hands behind your back. She struggled. For a brief, insane moment, I thought she was going to hit the bailiff with her purse. She thrashed, screaming insults, her composure completely shattered. You are all jealous. You are just jealous of my money. You're trash. All of you are trash. Officer Miller didn't flinch. He secured her wrists in the cuffs. The sound of the ratchet tightening was the sound of consequences finally catching up. As Officer Miller marched her toward the holding cell door, Patricia's heels dragged across the linoleum floor. She wasn't walking with the runway strut she had entered with. She was being half-carried, kicking and screaming like a child denied a toy. Richard! Call Richard! She shrieked, her voice cracking. Tell him to sue the city. Tell him to fire this judge. This is kidnapping. I am Patricia van der Hoven. The gallery watched in stunned silence. The pillar of the community, the woman who sat on museum boards and attended galas, was reduced to a frantic, shouting mess. One of her designer shoes slipped off her foot and lay lonely in the middle of the aisle, a perfect symbol of her stripped status. She didn't look like a socialite anymore. She looked like exactly what she was, a convict. Officer Miller reached the heavy steel door that leads to the holding cells. He opened it, and for a brief second, the sounds of the jail spilled out the clanging of bars, the murmur of other inmates. Patricia's eyes went wide. She planted her feet, trying to resist the inevitable. No, please. I'm sorry. I'll pay. I'll pay double. Just don't put me in there. It is too late for that, Mrs. van der Hoven, Officer Miller said firmly. He guided her through the doorway. Her screams of, "Do you know who I am?" were cut off abruptly as the heavy metal door slammed shut with a final, resonant thud. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive anymore. It was the clean, quiet silence of justice having been served. The energy in the room shifted instantly. The tension that Patricia had brought in with her arrogance evaporated, replaced by a collective exhale. I turned back to the defense table. Mr. Sterling stood there alone, looking at the empty chair where his client had been sitting moments ago. He looked exhausted. He slowly began packing his briefcase, shaking his head. Your Honor, he said, his voice low, I apologize to the court for my client's outburst. And to Mr. Turner. He turned to the young man in the back. I am sorry for what happened to you. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, I said. You did your job, but your client made hers impossible to do. I looked at Liam. He was still standing, staring at the door where Patricia had disappeared. He looked shocked, as if he couldn't quite believe the nightmare was over. Tears were streaming down his face, washing over the bandages on his neck. Mr. Turner, I said gently, it's over. You can sit down. He sank onto the bench, burying his face in his hands. I could see his shoulders shaking. Thank you, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Thank you. Mr. Turner, I continued, I want to clarify something regarding the restitution. I am not going to make you wait for Mrs. Vanderhoven to write a check whenever she feels like it. The court is ordering the $10,000 she posted for bail to be immediately converted to restitution. You will be able to pick up a check from the clerk's office before you leave the building today. That is $5,000 for you, immediately. It should cover your windshield, your medical bills, and get you back on your feet. Liam looked up, his eyes wide. 5,000? Your Honor, that pays for my EMT classes. That pays my rent for months. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I told him. You endured humiliation and pain with more dignity than that woman has shown in her entire life. You stayed calm. You respected the law. And today, the law is working for you. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the courtroom. Let this be a lesson, I said, addressing everyone present. Money can buy a lot of things. It can buy a Range Rover. It can buy a Tom Ford suit. It can buy a lawyer like Mr. Sterling. But it cannot buy character. And in this room, character counts. I picked up my gavel, feeling the familiar weight of it in my hand. We are going to take a 10-minute recess to process the paperwork for Mr. Turner. But before we do, I want to say one last thing about power. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. The camera in the corner of the room zoomed in. This was the moment that would be clipped and shared millions of times. This was the message I wanted the world to hear. Mrs. Vanderhoven thought her power came from her husband's name and her bank account. She thought power meant the ability to crush people beneath her. But she was wrong. Real power is the restraint you show when you are angry. Real power is the kindness you show to someone who can do nothing for you. Mr. Turner showed power today. Mrs. Vanderhoven showed nothing but weakness disguised as wealth. The gavel banged, a sharp, final note that signaled the end of the docket, but the energy in the courtroom had shifted permanently. My clerk, Sarah, looked over at me and exhaled a breath she seemed to have been holding for an hour. I've never seen anyone drag their feet like that in designer heels, she whispered. I just nodded. We had witnessed a collision between two worlds, and for once, the right world won. But the story didn't end when the jail doors slammed shut. As with all cases that touch a nerve in the community, there was an aftermath. And because you have followed this journey, you deserve to know what happened when the cameras stopped rolling. First, let's talk about Patricia Vanderhoven. She served her time. Her husband, Richard, did eventually show up at the courthouse later that afternoon, but he didn't storm in demanding her release. He walked in quietly, spoke to Mr. Sterling, and when he was told about the 120-day sentence and the public humiliation, he simply nodded. Rumor has it, he was tired of her antics too. He didn't appeal the sentence. He let her sit in that cell. Patricia served 96 days with time off for, well, not good behavior, but nonviolent behavior. But the real punishment wasn't the jail time. It was the social exile. The Silver Creek Club revoked her membership, citing a violation of their code of conduct. She was removed from the art museum board. The video of her screaming, "Do you know who I am?" while being handcuffed became the defining image of her life. She learned the hard way that in the age of the internet, reputation is fragile and infamy is forever. Now, for the part of the story that actually matters, Liam Turner. He picked up that check for $5,000 before he left the building that day. I saw him in the clerk's office, holding the piece of paper like it was made of gold. He didn't buy a new car. He fixed the windshield on his Toyota Corolla. He paid his rent, and he paid his tuition. 6 months later, I received a letter in my chambers. It was a graduation announcement. Liam had completed his EMT certification with honors. Inside the card was a handwritten note. It didn't say much, just, "Judge Boyd, thank you for seeing me when she looked right through me. P.S. I'm working for the city ambulance service now. I promise to never block anyone in, unless I'm saving a life." I keep that card on my desk. It reminds me why I do this job. It reminds me that the law isn't just a dusty set of rules in a book. It is a shield for the Liams of the world against the Patricias. It is the great equalizer that strips away the bank accounts and the titles and leaves only the truth. We live in a world that often rewards the loudest voices and the deepest pockets. It is easy to become cynical. It is easy to think that the system is broken, that the rich always get away with it, and that the little guy always loses. And sometimes, unfortunately, that is true. But not in my courtroom, not on my watch. In my court, it doesn't matter if you drive a Range Rover or a rusted Corolla. It doesn't matter if you wear silk or a uniform. When you stand before the bench, you are stripped of your ego. You are judged solely on your actions. Patricia van der Hoeven forgot that. She thought she was the main character of the universe. She found out she was just another defendant on the docket. Thank you for watching this case unfold. If this story satisfied that part of you that craves justice, if it made you believe even for a second that fairness still exists, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that character matters. Because as long as there are people like Patricia out there thinking they are above the law, I'll be right here, gavel in hand, ready to remind them that gravity applies to everyone. I'm Judge Boyd. Court is adjourned.